Good morning, everyone. Contrary to Derek, I'm going to start today with a rhetorical question, but one that I want you to think about and have answers in your mind. Okay, you ready? What are the key traits to a good missionary? Okay, do you have a couple traits in mind? Did you have love on your list? If so, was it at the top? Missions history is filled with examples of the power of love in impacting people for eternity. Today I want to just share with you two examples. The first one is Mabel Green, an Australian WEC missionary who went to Brazil in 1929. She only served for 6 months before dying on the field. Yet in that short time of 6 months, her love made a deep imprint. This is from her funeral service. Little Edith, the Indian girl whom Mabel Green had in a sense fostered, was among the mourners at the graveside. She had been orphaned as an infant when her mother was shot. She climbed onto the knee of Pat Sims, who was soon to leave for furlough, and whispered, "While you are away, get me another white mother like the last one, for she loved little girls." Now, do you picture little Edith as being one easy to love? Perhaps she was. But the hard reality of loving people cross-culturally is that many of them are not easy to love. In fact, some are extremely difficult to love and require of us the kind of sacrificial love displayed to us by Jesus himself. I had one such person in Turkey who was particularly difficult for me to love. He was a professing believer from another city who moved to the city in which we were doing church planting. He wanted to be the leader of the church, so he started to spread false reports about me and Hans, our co-worker. We were hurt, and we were fearful that he was going to succeed in taking over the church. We devoted ourselves to prayer, and God in his mercy answered by revealing to the other believers in the church major areas of sin in the life of this man that discredited him in their eyes. However, in retrospect, I have to confess that I didn't really love this man with the kind of sacrificial love that Jesus displayed. Oh, I prayed a lot, but I prayed that his lies would be discovered, that he would be discredited, but I didn't really pray for him and his well-being. So our second example from missions history will give you a better example than me in how to love people who are extremely difficult to love. In the 1960s, a tribal group in the Amazon called the YY had a great turning to Christ. They immediately began reaching out to surrounding tribes at great sacrifice of their comfort, energy, time, food supply, and all of this in the context of much opposition. But God gave them great fruitfulness for their efforts. However, one tribe, the Atrawari, renowned for their vicious anger, murder, and selfish greed, presented a monumental challenge to the YY and their ability to love. The YY prayed for many years for God to open a door to share Jesus with the Atrawari. Finally, a group of 7 YY men were sent from their village church, and they encountered a group of about 20 Atrawari. In their reception, the Atrawari stripped them of all their belongings. When the Atrawari were convinced that there was nothing left for them to steal, they let the 7 YY leave in their canoes. The YY lost a lot that day, but they rejoiced that they had their first encounter with the Atrawari. After other brief, difficult encounters with the Atrawari, the YY became despondent. They had gotten nowhere with them in sharing Jesus. They cried out all night in desperate prayer, "Father, we've done all we know what to do. We've risked our lives. We've given away our possessions. We've endured humiliation. What else can we do? Then a breakthrough occurred as a result of their devotion to prayer and perseverance. After numerous invitations of a group of Atrawari finally came to the YY village for the first time. But the visit was a disaster. What does loving those who are extremely difficult to love look like? At the end of the day, after the Atrawari had stolen from every house in the village, the YY ran into their homes to get whatever sweet potatoes, bananas, and farina they had left. Why? Because they did not want the Atrawari to leave on an empty stomach, so they gave them food for their trip. They had been praying for 7 years for this opportunity to host the Atrawari, and the YY wanted the Atrawari to know that God had given them a love for them. Later, a demanding and belligerent group of Atrawari burst into the YY village. The YY did not hold back, but let them take whatever they wanted until they started to demand the YY wives. The YY drew the line there. They strongly refused the Atrawari and their lustful demands. The YY knew the tensions were growing, so one of the believers started to shout, "To the church for singing!" And all the men started hustling the Atrawari to the church. At the same time, they whispered to the women, "Take the children and go to the jungle." They sang and they sang and they sang until the Atrawari were exhausted. Don't you love spirit-inspired creativity? And then the YY men gave them food and drink for their journey home. This went on for years. The YY seeking to love their enemy, the Atrawari, and being taken advantage of again and again and again. The first fruit of salvation among the Atrawari came years later when a group of Atrawari that included 2 orphan boys stayed with the YY. After learning that the Atrawari planned to kill the boys, the YY took them in and raised them as their own. God used this demonstration of sacrificial love to bring these 2 boys to faith, and that opened the door for many more Atrawari to follow. Love. God demonstrated his love toward us by sending Christ to die for us when we were his enemies. Paul reminds us of the preeminence of love in his first letter to the Corinthians. Mabel Green and the YY believers are examples of the power of God's love in taking the gospel cross-culturally. If you're like me, you hear these stories and you feel convicted of the smallness of your love. Let us all be striving together to excel even more in loving God and loving people as we fulfill his mission.